EU leaders met this week in Slovenia to discuss the bloc being expanded to include the 6 remaining Western Balkan countries, despite widespread pessimism. Brussels wants to be seen as a key player in the region, but has so far given no clear enlargement deadlines. To discuss this, as well as the mounting challenges for the EU, I'm joined by the Slovenian Prime Minister, Mr. Janeza Janše. So, Prime Minister, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, do you see any risk of the EU losing its credibility if countries which are aligning with EU membership criteria are not allowed to the club?
Yeah, of course, this risk is evident, but since a few years ago, the enlargement, as it was decided in the Thessaloniki summit in 2003, where the EU membership was granted for the countries of Western Balkans, is coming again on the agenda. I think that we are slowly gaining momentum again, but it's still.
But it's still a long way to go, as we can see.
It's still a long way to go, but after a long battle, we succeeded to put the word enlargement in the declaration. So it's not only talking about the European perspective of those countries. They are all European countries because they exist at the European continent. And now that there is a consensus of the 27 member states that enlargement is on the table again. We are not able to negotiate 10 years timeline for the process, but we are not giving up. So I think that this discussion will go on, and timeline is very important. So if the process is open-end, then there is no hope, there is no incentives. After 18 years, when people who were born in 2003 will first live up. So it's very important, and this summit was not the breakthrough, but it was the beginning of breakthrough.
But we see that there are rising tensions in the region in several countries of the Western Balkans. Do you think that the EU is bearing some responsibility of it because of citizens losing hope of joining finally?
Well, the region, the Western Balkans, or the Balkans, this is the region which has been, since we know for known history, the region of tensions. So this is why 18 years ago we decided, our predecessors decided that the only lasting, the only sustainable solution for the region, if you want to keep peace and stability, is EU membership. And many of those small issues which are rising every day, different conflicts, some stickers for the plates and some other issues, are coming on the table because so far during the last years we somehow abandoned this assessment and also this strategy. And if you don't have strategic answers for the strategic challenges, then you have to deal with tens or hundreds of different issues and conflicts. And the Balkan is very good surroundings, very good region for such conflicts to arise. This is why we insist that we have to run 3 parallel processes. One is to at the same time. So one is to reform some of the EU institutions to be able, we are able to function with enlarged capacities, with a large number of member countries, and then to other processes, the enlargement process, negotiation process, and the solving of those specific problems are taking around the same tables, because the mood would be totally different. So if we argue, for instance, about the borders are still important on the Western Balkans, then I don't see any good solution which could be taken by consensus in the region and also in Europe, to change the borders because of the history of all other issues. But the solution for such problems is that we are making borders less important. And with the EU membership, the borders are less important. So between Slovenia and Italy, 30 years ago, the Yugoslav People's Army still killed people who wanted to go from east to west. And now there's no border. So and our minority on the Italian side is part of this carceral space, and vice versa for Italian minority on our side. So it's totally different situation, and if you want to avoid such conflicts and not the development which nobody wants, we need to pursue this second option.
But this is still far from happening, at least for the moment. Do you
Depends.
see, are you worried, for example, that if the EU doesn't change course or doesn't give any specific timeline or deadline for the enlargement, these countries will turn more towards Russia or China?
It's true, speaking only about investment, infrastructure, economic cooperation and so on. Okay, we are doing this. European Union is the biggest investor in the region. It's very important, they appreciate it, but in those areas we have competitors. There is also, as you said, China, Russia, Turkey, they are also coming with the investment, and we are not conditioning this. We are conditioning this with the European standards, rule of law, reforms, and which is okay if there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But if the EU membership perspective is not granted, then I think we will start to lose this competition. So competition battle. So it's very clear.
There is a real risk.
And there is only one big advantage on our side, and this is EU membership. So I think that nobody, or almost nobody, from the Western Balkans wants to be part of China, Russia, or Turkey. So they want to be part of the European Union. But if this perspective is not real, then we are losing momentum, and we are at the crucial moment. So this summit happened at a crucial moment, and I believe that we started to turn the process around.
The French take over presidency from Slovenia in 6 months in the summer, I think. So are you worried, are you afraid that this portfolio, this Balkan dossier, will be completely forgotten then?
No, I don't think so, because I have followed the efforts made by President Macron during the last few days, also during this night. Meeting with different leaders, helping us to solve some open issues, to facilitate between Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo. So he was very engaged, and his speech at the summit was also, I have to say, more bold than we were used regarding French position on this issue in last decade.
Is the French elections the key to unblock the situation? Because of course President Macron has some elections ahead, and maybe he doesn't want something like that to be in the agenda or to put at risk his re-election. So after that, do you see any new momentum coming forward?
No, we decided that we have such summit regularly. So before next summit, I think both French elections are over, and we are able to deliver the second half of the package. First half was delivered today with including the word enlargement in the text, which and this changed the whole subject of the declaration. It's really crucial. It's really crucial. It's a long battle, not visible, but we succeeded to organize consensus of 27 member states around again after 18 years. And I think that France is sincerely against this one. Not against, but for this one.
But let's move on another subject now. We see that EU defense and migration are again high on the agenda, and Afghanistan was a watershed moment. Let's start from the migration issue, as we have also the EU Resettlement Forum on Afghanistan. What should we expect there?
On migration issue, I think that something crucial happened not so long ago. And our interior minister was able to negotiate common position of 27 states regarding the tackling the potential refugee crisis from Afghanistan. So we were able to take by consensus the position where we clearly separate legal and illegal migration. And we clearly said our obligation is to help those who helped us, but there is no place in Europe for 10 million Afghanistan people able to help them.
But should the EU make concrete pledges for Afghans to legally migrate to Europe? Afghans in need to legally migrate to Europe.
No.
Should the EU live up to its humanitarian values?
Afghans in need, I think, vast part of this category is already in Europe. Some of them are in the United States. But for all others who want to immigrate to Europe because of the economic reasons, not because they were part of the NATO missions and so on, and they're not endangered, I think that we have to use the normal procedures. So if they fulfill the criteria seriously, they no so-called humanitarian corridors, because the European Union will not repeat the mistake some member countries made in 2015 after the war in Syria, because this didn't hurt only the fiber of the European Union, but also some people who are real refugees, and we were not able to help them because we took million migrants who were not refugees.
So you're saying that
and
Germany...
they took place of those who are really in need.
So Germany made a mistake back in 2015?
I think that Germany made a mistake, and not only Germany, it was European. There's no consensus how to react, and first wave of people coming after the war were more or less refugees we were able to see. But then hundreds of thousands of people came because they felt invited. And to be able to picture the situation, well, it was a war, but it was not a war everywhere. And there were good proposals at the time by Turkey to create a non-fly zone in one part of Syria, protect this part of the country with blue helmets, and take care for the refugees there. But we were not able to agree on this solution, and then we paid the price. So imagine Slovenia is a country of 20-something million people, and within few weeks of 2015, 500,000 migrants crossed the country. Our border collapsed, and borders of some other countries also collapsed. This is the same situation as, for instance, 30 million migrants is crossing Germany. Imagine the reaction. So it's not only the final phase of the consequences, it's also the process and the path and so on. And if you remember the campaign for Brexit, those columns crossing Croatia, Slovenia were used for those who advocated for Brexit.
Used, as you said.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a part of the propaganda, or political propaganda in some parts of Europe. So
it's difficult if you see thousands of military men young men, military-able men, crossing the border without families, without women, children, and taking them all as refugees. This is not going on. You are not able to sell it.
So for you, the most important thing is to protect, let's say, the European borders from migration.
There are two crucial things. One is to have strict regulation and to see what are refugees and what are migrants. So to be able to also to execute the humanitarian obligation of the Union, which is in our treaty. The second thing is, or maybe the first thing is, if we want to do this, we have to have borders. Otherwise, you are not able to separate the groups or the problems.
Well,
I think that this is happening now. Even during this discussion yesterday, there is strong consensus on those issues. So nobody wants to repeat 2015.
As I see, there are different approaches within the bloc when it comes to humanitarian values, because you are saying this, another leader says something other, something different, and it's the same when it comes to European values in general. We see these divisions. Some member states insist that they want to defend the rule of law, and some other states, especially the Eastern member states, that have a different opinion on that, although they signed up to a treaty describing very clearly what these values are. What is your feeling of that? How sustainable is this, finally?
Actually, there is something what's written in the treaty, and then there is the political use or abuse of the term rule of law. So it's like I don't know.
What is the abuse?
Human rights. We know we have the UN Charter of Human Rights. We have the European Charter of Human Rights, but in political language, especially in the European Parliament, everyone can add to this list whatever he or she wants. So it's politically abused term and used for political battle. I think that we clarified this issue last year when there was this big debate regarding conditioning the RRF funds in the rule of law. We say, okay, but who is deciding on who is breaking the rule of law? And it was our suggestion, it was our proposal, which was at the end the formal decision that if we don't agree, on some things, and this is substantial issue. It's not on the European Parliament or the European Council to decide. It's on the European Court. Actually, we established the European Court for such cases. But first proposal was that there is decision of the European Commission and the European Council with the qualified majority, what the rule of law is and what the rule of law is not. So this is a political decision. Imagine that in your country, the parliament is deciding what's the rule of law and what's not the rule of law. We have separate power, and this is judiciary too.
But I guess the freedom of press or the judicial independence are part of the rule of law, clearly, no?
The freedom of speech, which includes also the freedom of media, and the independence of judiciary, is not only the value. It's part of the system, not only of the European Union. It's part of the constitutional systems of every single member state. If this is not the case, you are not able to become a member of the European Union.
But do you see political attack from some member states towards, for example, your country or Hungary or Poland, to name them as well?
Well, if you collect a majority in the European Parliament, and this is political majority, you can name and blame any country. So after, and I don't think this is very good, and it's especially much worse. Okay, European Parliament is political body. It's a place for the political debates and also for political conflicts. But it's not the same with the European Commission and the European Council. According to the treaty, the European Commission should stay out of the political battles, which was the case till the Juncker Commission, and then this changed. And I think that this is close to breaking the rule of law, because Commission has to be honest broker, so dealing with the issues which are clear, not in all cases. For instance, Vera Jourova is, according to my opinion, is issuing statements which are a clear violation of the treaty. But she is supported by the European press, so she is continuing with this. If this would happen 15 years ago, I think she wouldn't stay as a member of the Commission for 1 week. At that time, the rules were clear.
Mm-hmm. But do you support the liberal democracy as we know it?
No, I support democracy. Why do you call democracy liberal democracy?
This is a term which exists
for
years.
No, it exists for the last 20 years, but I can tell you that when 35 years ago, in Slovenia, we fought for free elections and human rights, and there were huge protests because we were imprisoned as young journalists. At that time, we fought for democracy, and at that time we thought that any kind of democracy is good for us. Liberal democracy, Christian democracy, social democracy, they are just colors of different values.
Mm-hmm.
But if all agree on the basic principles of democracy, they are all welcome. And when we established first parties, we really didn't know what's the real difference. So some people, they established Social Democratic Party, others Liberal Party, and we fought for democracy. After that, in the theory, the liberal democracy was used as a term, as a general term for democracy, which is benefiting the liberals. It's true. Imagine that we started to speak that only real democracy is Christian democracy.
But can you still shape European policies with the people that you think that they attack your approach about democracy?
Look, the very foundation from the beginning of the known history, from the Greece era, is that we have different values, we are different, and this is exactly why we need an instrument to decide on the issues where we have different opinions. So, and the only alternative to voting, to the democracy, to the democratic process is fighting. And I think that the biggest achievement of the Western civilization is that we succeeded through the history, also through the tragedies in this history, to come to some kind of agreement that as Churchill said, democracy is not the ideal thing, but it's the best we know. And we have to stick with it. And the European Union is, I think, is a miracle because it's some kind of a startup. Now not exactly the startup, but at the beginning it was a startup. Mm-hmm. It was example. It was something our founding fathers tried to make this knowledge sustainable, lasting. As Jean Monnet said, nothing happened without people, nothing lasts without the institutions. And we created institutions. And I think that the European Union, will survive if we are able to combine those two levels of the democratic of the processes of the democratic decisions. One is on national level, and the second one is on the European level. And sometimes there are clashes here, which is understandable, because this is first time we are doing it.
Let's move on to another disagreement, let's say, something that again the member states cannot agree on, of course, the EU defense. And I would like to ask you, should the EU really focus now on building its own military capabilities, or it should reinforce the alliances, or to be more reliant on the United States and NATO?
Well,
the famous strategic autonomy.
yeah, I know. During last 20 years, even during last 15 years, the world has changed strategically. I remember when we fought for our independence and we visited NATO headquarters, or the one high official from NATO headquarters at his home in Brussels. He said, look, NATO won the Cold War without the battle. It's a new era, now everything is bright and so on. And it seemed like that at that time. But during last, and when Slovenia entered NATO and the European Union, some people were asking why we still need NATO. So everything is okay, there is no Cold War anymore. Russia will become a real democratic, friendly country. China was not noticeable at that time because the GDP of China 15 years ago was much lower, and their defense spending also on a very low level. But after 15 years ago, China is a superpower. They came to Mars without us noticing this. Really, they are very far in artificial intelligence and the cyber capacities. Now we are struggling with the lack of semiconductors, and we still don't know what's the real issue behind, but we know what are the consequences. So, to make long answer short, we need NATO. During this discussion last night also, those EU member countries which are not members of NATO admitted that we need NATO. But NATO and the United States will not solve the problems and conflicts in our backyard, in our neighborhood, in Western Balkans, for instance, in the Mediterranean. This is our duty. And frankly speaking, we don't need to spend much more for the defense, because the European Union, if we put together all defense budgets of EU member states, we get, I think, 5 times the sum, the number, as there is Russian defense budget. So we spend, for instance, the defense spending of France is close to the defense spending of Russia. And altogether we spend more than China. And China is spending half of the defense budget of the United States. But our problem is that we are producing many planes, many tanks, many different types of equipment, logistic equipment. So we have somehow to coordinate this. We have been speaking about this need for coordination for decades. And I hope that after last night's discussion, we come closer to the agreement that there is no or NATO or European army or NATO or European defense. We need both. We need both, and this is not against the United States. We need them. They also need us. I just hope that they are aware of this. And at the end, strong Europe able to secure its own border, taking care for the security in our neighborhood, helping those who are not able to provide security, and we are just sending money and humanitarian aid, which is then finishing in the hands of the terrorists or the warlords. This is something we have to take more seriously. Africa is our backyard, it's not the backyard of the United States. So we need 3 moves here. There are some plans going on. Yesterday discussion on this issue was very kind.
Was this AUKUS agreement an alarming moment for the EU in this field? And a bit humiliating, I would say.
Actually, there were two alarm bells ringed in the near past. One was Afghanistan. So our strategic partner, the United States, decided without us to pull out. We are not part of the decision-making process, despite this was first occasion when the Article 5 of the NATO treaty was taken, because United States were attacked. So this was one alarming bell. The second was, as you mentioned, AUKUS agreement, which is partially understandable because the situation has changed in the last years. The arms race is becoming again nuclear, and we have to be aware of this. But among partners, you know, if you decide to leave the treaty or the meeting, you should tell him before.
Is it below to the transatlantic relations?
But frankly speaking, we heard yesterday a lot of infos regarding so-called damage control. I also got yesterday morning call from Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He tried to tell me and ask me to convey this to our colleague that for them European Union is still a strategic partner, that there were different reasons for this behavior. That there are other areas for cooperation, defense included. I think that there is reflection time after what's happened, and European Union is needed in the Pacific, not only France, but you know, this global challenge is not something which is not infecting the European Union. European Union, admitting this or not, is global power. It's global power, not in all areas, but in many areas it's a global power. We have influence on the world, and the world has influence on us, and we have to take this responsibility.
And I would like to move on a bit more to another issue that was discussed among leaders, and I know there is a huge debate about that, and it's energy prices. So, do you agree with the Spanish proposal to collectively buy energy in Europe?
First of all, the energy crisis, or this significant rise of prices for the electricity, is not symmetric so far. So it's the real feel of it. It's in Spain it's very high, in Slovenia it's not very high, and there is half of Europe where we still have some long-term contracts which are expiring next year or year after next year. But mostly the real feel of the crisis will become symmetric in the spring next year. So this warning coming from Spain is very useful. It's very useful. The real debate started last night. It was not enough time to conclude it, but we are continuing with it during next regular summit very soon. And the European Commission is also making assessment, and we will get a clear picture. It's not currently. It's not for me, at least. It's not. When I studied many issues regarding this, many assessment regarding this situation, it's not clear if we know all triggers which cause this situation. We know who is making benefits, but we still don't know for all the reasons. And you know, shooting back before you know who is shooting the field, it's a little risky. But we know that this is danger. How serious we still don't know, but it's a danger for the recovery of the European Union after the pandemic. Now we have very good economic figures in Eurozone, in whole Europe mostly, Slovenia included. So our growth and employment, everything is as it was 2007, 2008. But we know what happened after that. So the last economic crisis started precisely with the rising prices. And the experts thought at the beginning, well, this is temporary, nothing will happen, then it exploded. So we have to be cautious. I hope that European banks are more solid now, and that also European Union has created some mechanisms which were not existing when the last economic and financial crisis started. So I'm not pessimist totally, but we have to be aware that energy prices are part of all other prices. There's logistic, and even if there is no direct connection, at the end you get a bill to your house and you see the number, and this is starting to
And does this also
influence.
put at risk the green project?
Yeah, of course. Everything, remember that 2008, the climate change and the green transition was very high on the agenda. But then we were hit with the financial economic crisis, and for 5 years this issue disappeared from the agenda of the European institutions. Everybody forgot about the climate change and so on. We needed recovery before we came back to the same issue.
So you are concerned about what's happening?
I'm concerned, but I think that with the difference what happened 2008, 2009, now we are more cautious, and the reactions are, I hope, on time.
And before we close, I want to comment to the recent scandal of Pandora Papers. So, should the EU not crack down harder on tax avoidance? And to be more concrete, should, for example, the Dutch finance minister deal with this issue when he's directly implicated in this?
Actually, I had no time during last days to study those papers. I saw some titles on the internet, so I don't know what the real issue is, but in general, the answer is yes. If you want really to create European Union, which is honest and fair place for everybody, then we have to have clear rules and no double standards for anyone.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for this very interesting interview.
Thank you for very interesting questions.